Today, we're joined by one of the younger leaders making waves in the trades.
I got into the trade when I was 16.
You bought a company at just 24 years old. This is both the American dream and also extremely rare.
It's not what you know, it's who you know. And being in the right place at the right time can make a world of difference.
Be real with me. What did this transaction look like?
Well, if you haven't sat in a dark room with your face in your hands wondering how you're going to make it through, you probably haven't been in business.
This is a fantastically interesting episode.
A lot of us business owners are technicians, so we have a really hard time hanging up that tool bag and letting someone else go do the work.
Hey guys, welcome to The Dispatch, where job site legends get the mic. Join me every other Thursday as I sit down with the biggest names in the trades to find out what's really happening to keep America running. So whether you're on the road or in the garage beer in hand, settle in for a great conversation. I'm Ryan Prosser, and this is The Dispatch. Welcome back to The Dispatch, where job site legends get the mic. Today we're joined by one of the younger leaders making waves in the trades, Karre, HVAC professional, owner of A+ Heating and AC, and someone who's worked in every level of the field from helper to owner, all before turning 30. Zach, super excited to have you on the show.
Yeah, Ryan, I'm excited to be here, and I appreciate the opportunity to advocate for the trade and share what I know.
So you're underselling, of course. You're not just advocating for the trade. You started a company, and we're pretty excited to dive into that. So for folks at home, of all ages that want to break out on their own, this is the episode for you. But Zach, before we get into the details, give us a little background on yourself and I don't know some of your high level stats that folks should know.
Yeah. So I've been in the HVAC industry for a little over 10 years now. So it was my first job. I got into the trade when I was 16 at a local company. A good friend of mine's dad owned a residential HVAC company. So I turned 16 and he offered me a job. I had been working, on the family farm, helping my grandpa rake and bale hay. And it was a really good opportunity for me. I always liked working with my hands and fixing things. So I thought it was something I'd be interested in. I didn't know what HVAC even meant at the time, but it was a really good foot in the door in the industry. And I worked for that company for a few years throughout high school, and then I went to a local community college for a trades program. I went through their HVAC program and got a certificate, and then I moved to Lincoln, Nebraska, which was a little bit better market. I got to see how much a market can truly influence a business and the potential that a market brings to a business. So, throughout my time with that larger company and a little bit better market, I got to learn the back end of the business, how to strategize and gain more leads. And it was just a really good learning experience in a better market before I went out on my own. And I didn't actually start my company as a greenfield startup, but I purchased a one-man shop that was ready to retire. He was just working out of his garage. I had the opportunity to pretty much buy a van and a phone number and the little bit of inventory that came in the van. So that was how I got into the business side of the industry. To tell you the truth, I really didn't know anything about business or business finance, but that's something that I needed to learn quickly. And so I deep dove into podcasts and books and really educated myself on the sales, marketing, and finance side of the industry as well.
I come from an ag background myself. I was born on a farm in Eastern Washington, born in Walla Walla, Washington, which is a trivia question. If anybody, most people think I'm from Texas, but very briefly from Washington State. And Zach, I'd love to know a little bit more about your background. I grew up on a farm. It was kind of a general purpose farm, so like a bit of a self-sustaining, the farm was meant to sustain the family kind of thing. Like, as a little kid, we'd fall in love with George the chicken, and then George would go away, and also we would eat chicken, and like as kids we didn't quite, initially didn't make that connection. And now I live in Montana. Zach, tell us a little bit more about your ag, path to the trades. Just give us 30 seconds. And what did you do? Did you love it? Do you hate it? Do you look back on it fondly? What do we need to know?
Yeah, I definitely don't miss the days sitting in a dusty tractor cab. But I do, give a lot of turning wrenches and the knowledge that I have on just mechanical function to the ag industry. And I was, a fairly young guy when I was in the ag industry and helping my grandpa bale hay. But there's a lot that goes into many industries that consumers don't necessarily see.
That's right. That's right. One thing that's fascinating about your background is you bought a company at just 24 years old. This is both the American dream, or at least the American dream out of that we hear about a lot, and also extremely rare. Can you give us, you know, I don't know, the anatomy, like the backdrop of how that happened? Like how does a kid at that age come to, in your words, purchase a van and a phone?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think a lot of us have heard the saying, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And being in the right place at the right time can make a world of difference. So I've now purchased two companies. I'm 27 now, but I bought my first company in March of 2023. And it's always been a connection. So I had an uncle that needed a new air conditioner in Omaha, Nebraska. And I was able to do the work, but not purchase the equipment. And he says, well, I have a cousin that owns a company in northern Colorado. Why don't you give him a call? So through the phone call, the gentleman let me know he was ready to sell his business and retire and move out of state. So I said, send me the financials and I'll take a peek at them. But I really didn't know what a profit and loss statement was or what a balance sheet was, how to determine what this company was worth. But I really took a risk and dove deep into sales and marketing and educated myself. And I think it's important that when you're in the beginning stages of the trade and you're working under another company, to really be observant on their operations and how they're marketing themselves, how are they pricing themselves, to ensure that when you go out on your own, that you can kind of rip off and duplicate those things that they're doing to ensure that you're successful on your end.
So, if you're okay with this, and if this is too personal, you just stop me. I think a lot of people out there are saying to themselves, "Yeah, but Zach, be real with me. What did this transaction look like? Like, how do you structure it? If you're just a guy out there and you're like, man, I wouldn't even know where to begin with this kind of thing. Like, what can you tell us about the actual structure that caused the counterparty? I think it was your uncle or whoever to shake hands and say, yeah, okay, deal, let's do it.
Yeah. I think the best way to go about it as on the buyer end of things is to ask for seller financing. A lot of these guys don't need a lump sum of cash up front. A long-term payment over 2 years, 3 years, 4 years works really good for both parties. And once you come to terms and agreements on what that finance strategy would look like, I would reach out to an attorney and have them do all the paperwork and all the logistics on the paperwork that needs to be signed to take care of that stuff. But I would just have multiple conversations between both the buyer and the seller and strategize on how you guys can make that financing work together without having a bank involved and just having one more thing in the puzzle that really doesn't need to be there. I think a lot of these guys that are ready to retire and get out are more than willing to offer something on the seller financing end.
So, audience, stick with me. I just want to make sure everybody's brought along on this journey. Zach, oftentimes there's several ways to value these businesses. What can you tell the audience about your knowledge if they're trying to value a business, they have a chance to buy a business. They're listening, they're not sure how to price this. Let's say that the business is currently doing $1 million in revenue and I don't know, 300,000 in profit. I don't know what would, but let's just say, do you have any
Yeah.
sense of like what a business like that would go for? And let's take it step by step. What do they multiply the revenue by? Or what do they multiply the profit by to come to a rough valuation to know if they're getting good deal, bad deal, etc.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really good question, too, Ryan. A lot of people that are going to buy a company, especially larger businesses that are consuming another company, are going to pay a multiple of profit, upwards of 10, 12 times multiple. So that can sometimes exceed the revenue number. But a lot of that comes down to the health of the business. How much recurring revenue do you have? How involved is the owner? if it's a solopreneur situation like the company I bought, it's not going to yield near the return because the owner is highly involved in the day-to-day operations. And then you also look at recurring revenue. In our industry, it's service plans. What keeps our guys busy during the slow times? Maintenance. So in the spring and fall, we're going out and we're doing maintenance plans for our customers, ensuring that their equipment's going to work year round. And those service plans are huge when it comes time to sell the business. And it's a conversation that I always have with people. If they're going to go out on their own, if they're going to start from a greenfield or they're going to buy a business, to really hone down on that recurring revenue and that net profit. I'm not big on avoiding a tax liability to save a little bit of money if I plan to sell the business at some point, because, $1 of profit may yield $10 on a sale. And so if you're selling for a 10 times multiple, every dollar of profit really matters.
And I'm going to translate, audience, I'm going to translate some of this for you guys, but one more question for Zach. Zach, what's a typical revenue multiple? Is it 1 times revenue or?
Yeah, I think it's pretty close to 1 times revenue. And like I said, depending on the health of the company, how involved that owner is, I would say if you have an owner that is 100% hands off, the business can run itself without them being there, you can see a 10 to 12 times multiple of the profit. So if you're 10% net profit and you get a 10% multiple or a 10 times multiple, you're going to land right in that 1 times revenue mark.
That's
but if
right.
you're
That's right.
a solopreneur and you're just working for yourself and you're doing all of the work, you might only yield 1 or 2 or 3 times net profit. And that's generally going to fall far below that 1 times revenue.
So audience, I'm going to take some of this and summarize it. And Zach, you tell me if you agree with this, because I think this is a fantastically interesting episode for a certain type of our audience member that may have a chance to buy a business and is trying to understand value here. The bottom line profit, sometimes called EBITDA, sometimes called operating profit. You're going to take that number, you're going to multiply it by 10. That's the value of the business. If this thing is kind of running itself. How do you know if it's running itself? Ask the owner when the last time he took a 2-week vacation was. Okay. If he cannot remember, or it's in a different decade, or his wife yells from the other room, never. Okay. That's owner operated. So you're going to take, in that case, you're going to take the profit, you're going to multiply it by, let's say, 3 to 4. Okay. In my original example, I think I said 300,000 in profit, I believe was the number we used, which is way too high, but whatever, it's not built to whatever. Just pretend it's real. You 300,000 times 3, $900,000 business. If you're like, when's the last time you took a vacation? And he says, man, I all damn time. I'm down in South Florida hitting the tarpon. I always chase the elk up in Montana every October, November. Whatever the case may be, a couple of different, wow, this business is kind of running itself. You're going to take that 300,000, multiply it by 10. That's a $3 million business. What Zach was saying, and I got kind of these multiples, I used too big of a profit margin, but we're just going to pretend, the safest thing is you could just ask them what their revenue is, and you're probably just going to buy it for 1 times revenue if the business is running itself. If it's not running itself, it's going to be, let's call it half that. So these are some multiples. You go ahead, write these down in your notepad. And as you're talking with business owners, those are some numbers you can keep in mind. So it's about 1 times revenue, kind of on the top end if it's running well, maybe half times revenue if it's not. On the times earnings, 2 to 3 times earnings if owner's really super involved. If he's able to tell you a couple different times he's been on vacation, we're going to use that 10x multiple. The reason we use 2 different valuations is you're going to want to compare them, and see if they're wildly different from each other, and probably average them out. If one comes in at 1 million, the other one comes in at 1.2 million, you're probably looking at a $1.1 million business. Zach, would you agree with some of this that I've just covered here?
Yeah, I definitely agree, Ryan. And a point I really like to make clear to people that are thinking about selling a business at some point. Maybe they haven't even started this business that they'd like to sell someday. but the importance of every dollar in profit is huge. For instance, there's a lot of people that want to go buy a new truck at the end of the year to avoid paying taxes. It's a very common thing in business and avoiding a tax bill. But if you go buy an $80,000 truck in November because you're avoiding that tax liability, that $80,000 tax deduction could potentially be worth $800,000 on a sale on a 10 times multiple. So every dollar is extremely important, and just make buying decisions. Just be very wary when you're making buying decisions at the end of the year if it's a purchase that should be made or not.
I'll just say, to the to the audience, one of the craziest tax write-offs out there is the based on the weight of the vehicle tax write-off. Zach, I don't know if you're up to speed on this one. You're nodding your head like you probably are. We
Yeah.
see, massage therapists here in Montana driving F-250s because the vehicle has to weigh whatever it is, 6,500 pounds. It's a big. It was intended to be farm equipment, was the original
Right.
envision, and it said, okay, if it's above a certain amount, it gets this super duper tax treatment. And so you've got, like I said, massage therapists driving F-250 super diesels because it's got to be above a certain weight. I'll say, fellas, if you're into big trucks and tax write-offs, you're going to want to have your accountant look into that one. We are rapidly turning into a very particular type of episode here today. Zach, I'm loving this. Zach, let's talk about a world that you might not be as familiar with, but I bet you think about it from time to time, and that's people selling HVAC businesses. So if somebody's, I don't think you've done that yet, but it's pretty easy to run the economics the other way too, right?
Yeah.
What are some of the things that, we've had here on the show several people that either work at HVAC companies that are private equity owned, or they've sold to them, or whatever the case may be. If you're out there and you're running an HVAC business, odds are you're going to get an offer from private equity, especially if you've gotten it to the point where it kind of runs itself. What are some of the things you've heard that you've experienced that you think somebody that's considering selling their business should know to get maximum dollar?
Yeah. Yeah, Ryan, I really think that profit and recurring revenue is definitely the most important thing. I would do some research on what yields the biggest return, the highest multiple. And like you said, you mentioned EBITDA earlier, and just for the audience, for those of you that don't know what EBITDA is, it's a abbreviation for earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. So you can take your net profit and add back all of those things, the depreciation, the amortization, the taxes, all that stuff, to come up with your EBITDA number. They're going to pay you a multiple of that EBITDA. So like I said earlier, that multiple is going to be dependent on how involved the owner is, or what recurring revenue that company has. So I would set myself up and prepare myself a few years in advance of wanting to exit the business, and seeing what I can do to get that multiple 1 or 2 times higher than it is where you're currently standing. So whether that's delegating tasks or improving operations to become more profitable, those couple things are going to yield a much higher return when it comes time to sell your business.
Got it. Yeah. Yeah. I would say, in my experience, make that decision 2 years out, and the first year
Yeah.
is about getting your house in order, but you're not going to get it right. You're going to make some mistakes. And the second year is kind of about stabilizing your business at that kind of leaner, more
Right.
focused, whatever the case may be, level. This episode is brought to you by FieldMind, built for the hands that keep America running. FieldMind gives your field service techs ready access to technical documentation, service history, and your team's best tribal knowledge right where they are, in the field. FieldMind is the tool for field service techs. Learn more at fieldmind.com. Zach, I got some questions for you about running a business. So for people that are tuning in, they say, listen, I am not necessarily buying or selling. I'm curious what it's like running. What,
Yeah.
I think in my personal experience, running a business comes with its stresses for sure. Quality of sleep generally goes down, but it definitely comes with some other things. Has it been your experience that this has been better or worse than you, or different or what than you expected?
Yeah, I always tell people, if you haven't sat in a dark room with your face in your hands, wondering how you're going to make it through, you probably haven't been in business very long.
That's right.
So
Yeah.
it's definitely not always easy. It comes and it goes. It ebbs and flows. But the good times are really good. The bad times are really bad, and we all come out at the end. And I've been really happy with my time in business ownership. But I think the biggest thing for us in the HVAC industry or trades in general is a lot of us business owners are technicians turned business owners. So we have a really hard time of hanging up that tool bag and letting someone else go do the work. And a lot of people, they expect Zach to show up. If I start my business and it's just me out running the calls and I build a really good relationship with these customers, and then I start to delegate tasks and have a technician go do a job for these existing customers, that sometimes they might say, hey, well, where's Zach at? Well, Zach's focusing on ensuring that our customers receive the service that they look to receive when they're hiring a home service business, and that our employees receive the compensation and the training that they deserve. And so it takes a lot for a business owner to juggle both running service calls in the field and operating the business on the back end. So it's just really important that if you decide that you're going to go out in business, to make a plan. Do you want to be a solopreneur and operate something by yourself? Or do you want to scale a business and delegate tasks to other people, and build a workplace that everyone really wins? That's a saying that I always say is, here at A Plus, everyone wins. The customer wins, the technicians win, and at the end of the day, the company wins as well.
I was so my next question. Two more questions, and then let's go to the audience. Um,
Yeah.
I'm curious about, mistakes you see made a lot by new owners. They're new to the business, um, and I think it might have been the first episode of this show that we had. I was on with Adrian, and um, and I had listened to a live broadcast of his show, and he was talking with an HVAC, with a field technician, and the guy in the field was like, yeah, I drive a busted old van because I'm aware of the fact that, like, my operational costs are the enemy of my profit. So and so I've said time and again, like, one of the biggest mistakes you can make. I joked about that F-250 that gets the tax treatment earlier.
Right.
Um, Although that is available at basically any, it doesn't have to be a new truck. It can be used, but um, I the at least maybe it's where I live in Boomtown, Montana. We're so fast growing. I think your part of Colorado's doing pretty good too. But
Yeah.
it's so fast growing. I see a lot of these contractors driving these unbelievable trucks. That feels like one of the big mistakes to me, is that, a depreciating asset as such a flashy expense. Where does, question one, where does that fall on your top 10 list of biggest mistakes, and what do you think is the most common mistake that you see from new HVAC business owners?
Yeah. I think I'm gonna agree to disagree on that one, Ryan. I'm a new truck guy. When I
Okay,
got
here
into
we go. I
business,
knew it.
I uh, I bought the used trucks, and so I think the first van I bought cost me $15,000 or something like that. I thought I got a smoking deal on it. It only had 90,000 miles, which I thought was fairly low. It looked really nice for a used vehicle, and then shortly thereafter, it ends up in the shop. And so it spends a couple weeks in the shop. I don't know how many lost dollars in revenue we had there, but tens of thousands of dollars in lost revenue, plus a new engine that cost about $10,000. So we're talking $40,000 that it cost the company for that truck to be in the shop. So my philosophy
Interesting.
is, buy a newer, reliable vehicle and create a relationship with one really good salesman, and buy all of your vehicles from them, something that's under warranty. And when you have a relationship with that person and you have a vehicle issue, even new vehicles are going to have issues. But when you take it in, they give you a loaner, and you don't miss out on that revenue by having a vehicle in a shop and not being able to be out in a road.
Wow.
To tell you the truth, the amount of time that a used vehicle spends in the shop, the lost money, you could have went and bought a new van.
It's a powerful counterpoint, I have to say. I really had not considered the breakdown. We talked on last week's episode about trucks, and I'm a big Toyota guy. So,
Yeah.
this idea of breakdowns is not like, but man, my wife drives a Volvo. Let me just tell you guys, don't do it. Don't do it. The safety, yeah, I know they're famous for safety, and I take that seriously with my kids and everything. Holy smokes with this Volvo, you guys. I really, and the Volvo dealership is a 4-hour drive each direction for us. I mean, nothing in Montana is close, but wow, so that's my little rant on Volvo. One more question for you, then we go to the
Yeah.
audience. This whole episode has been about, or primarily about, people, thinking about taking the leap from technician to, owner operator. One of the things that intimidates people that I hear a lot is they're like, I'm not a master of accounting. I don't know what EBITDA means. I don't know what this means. I don't know what that means. And by the way, if you can watch an NFL game and understand the stats and anything about the defensive packages being run, anything like that, buddy, you are fine. Trust me. Like the modern NFL viewing experience is, I would say, 10 times more complicated than running a business in my experience. But Zach, you tell me, what should people, what's kind of like the baseline understanding they should come in with before taking the plunge as an owner?
Yeah. I think there's kind of three tiers of the knowledge that you should have, and that's sales, marketing, and financials. So I always tell people, really dive into your personal finances. If you're thinking about going and starting a business, the financial side of it is going to be one of the most important things. So if you're saving $200 a month on your income right now, without changing your income, see how you can save $300 a month and adjust little things in your personal life, and then translate that over to business. In business finance, there's many, many more moving parts. And sometimes just saving 1% on a certain item on your profit and loss can change that bottom line tremendously. So, really focus on finance, marketing, and sales.
Love it. Zach, we are cooking along on a great episode here today, but we've got to take a couple questions from the audience. Susie, what do you got for us today?
Hey everyone, yes, we have some questions from the audience. Remember, you can send us your questions on Instagram at fuelmind_app. So, hey Ryan, this is Chris from Oklahoma. I'm a young business owner, growing crew, and I gotta ask, what's the best way to train new guys so they actually stick? Not just show up for a paycheck, but learn the trade, take pride in it, and not wash out after 6 months.
A lot of people are trying to solve the same problem. How do we get this next generation in, get them trained, make them effective? Obviously this show is sponsored by Field Mind. That's something that we think a lot about, but there's a lot of ways to attack this. I'm curious, how is your business having success here?
Yeah. Yeah, I think training is definitely important. I think a lot of people are quick when times get slow. I know budgets shrink a little bit, but it's really important to take those newer, younger technicians and put them in a van with someone that's seasoned, a veteran that's been doing it for a long time and has had tremendous success, and learning from them. It's something that when I was in the trade, I always wanted to ride around with the best technician. I'd always have a notepad in my hand, taking notes and reviewing those when I got home. And I think the training aspect is really important, but I also think just standard operating procedures and them knowing what to do in certain situations can make their job much more enjoyable, and the proper tools. So, tech support tools, there's a lot of apps out there. Field Mind is a really cool new app that Ryan's got going on here. So we're really excited to implement that. But just take advantage of all the things that technology brings, whether it's manual J softwares or pricing softwares. People like to use new tools. There's nothing better than getting a new tool as a technician. So always provide them with the best of the best tools and anything that they could use out in the field to make their job easier, and make things really straightforward. With the operating procedures, they should know what to do. If a part needs ordered, they should have something in a manual that tells them how to go through that process. Not only does it make their job easier, but it makes your job easier as an owner as well, and not having to answer that phone call to answer questions that they could just look up in a handbook.
one of the things we hear a lot from folks that own HVAC companies is like they want the technician to stay there troubleshooting until they have, diagnosed the issue. At what point do you want your guys, especially maybe some of the more junior guys on your crew, at what point do you want them raising their hand, aka, calling a more senior guy versus
Yeah.
and maybe maybe that's built into your model. You're saying no, they ride along. But if someone's in the field, they're out there solo. At what point do you want them calling versus like versus like trying to troubleshoot it solo until they absolutely are sure they cannot solve this on their own?
Yeah. Yeah. And they can reach out at any time, to tell you the truth, Ryan. I think it's important to delegate certain junior technicians to certain senior technicians. So, if you have a team of 10 technicians and 5 of them are seniors and 5 of them are juniors, you should have a 1-to-1 ratio on, hey, this is my lead guy. Me, Zach, is a technician. I'm a junior technician. I call Mike when I need help. That way, Mike's not answering phone calls from 3 different technicians while he's trying to work, things like that. So we have far fewer technicians than that, but Grant can reach out to Michael when he needs help. And if Michael can't answer his question, he can escalate that call to me. But I think it's just important to have a system put in place to where only just 1 or 2 technicians is reaching out to a certain senior technician for any advice. And like I said, there's so many resources online nowadays. Sometimes something as simple as reading a service manual will answer your question.
Love it. Susie, I think we got time for one more.
Yes. Hey guys, this is Patrick from Dallas. Quick one here. When you took over a company at such a young age, how did you handle walking into rooms where everyone had more years in the trade than you? What's the smartest way for a young leader to earn real respect from older techs without trying to act like they know everything?
So, Zach, I love this question, and I'm going to let you answer it because this is obviously pointed at you. I am no one's calling me a young leader anymore, but that's what strikes me about this question is 20 years ago, I was similar to yourself. I was the youngest guy in most of the rooms that I was in, took a lot of pride in that, needed to manage and, both, employees and customers that were invariably kind of older than me. And then it was almost like I fell asleep like Rip Van Winkle. And then I woke up and now I'm the oldest guy in every room. And I don't really remember there being a middle stage at all. But you've got, both feet in that kind of earlier stage. I think you mentioned earlier in the program, you're about 27, 28 years old. How do you handle that?
Yeah, I really haven't had to handle that particular objection in a business ownership role quite so much as I did as a technician. Being a younger technician in the field and going out to people's houses, a lot of times people would question my age. And Grant, he's a technician here at A+, and I had a conversation with him. He rode around with a seasoned technician for 2 years before he went out on his own. And he's 18 years old, and he's running service calls on his own. And so I brought him into my office the day I let him know that we were going to give him his own service truck and he was going to get to go out on his own. And I just said, hey, man, you're a young guy. I was in the same shoes that you're in when I was your age. And there are going to be some people that question your age. And you just need to come up with something on why they should be reassured of your diagnostics and the company that they're working with. So something that I always say is, it's a really good question. I understand I am a young guy, but that's one reason I love working at A+ Heating and AC is that I know that if there's something that I have any issues with, I can call someone else. They can help me diagnose this thing, and we can have another technician assist if needed, free of charge.
Hey everyone, another ice cold hot take brought to you by Field Mind. There, once upon a time, I was a young guy, and now I'm the oldest guy in every room that I walk in. So my question is for the older techs out there. You were probably the youngest tech on every job, and now you're not. What was the moment in time that you realized I'm a senior tech? I want to know. Comment below. Cool. Zach, I got one last question for you. We've kept you too long already, but As you think back about, on your journey so far, and you've taken risks, they're paying off. This is kind of, I said American dream before. This sort of is that. What's a moment, in the recent past where you've said, this is why I do this?
Yeah, I really think it's employee appreciation. And when our technicians tell us how appreciative they are for the workplace that they have, it really it means a lot to me, and it definitely keeps me going through all the tough times that business brings. And but that's the biggest thing for me is employee and customer appreciation, and seeing that what we do is making an impact on many people's lives for sure.
I love it. Thanks so much for being on the show today, Zach.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Ryan. It's been good.
And thank you for listening. Join us next time as we meet with another frontline tradesman out there keeping America running. Thanks for listening to The Dispatch. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with a friend in the field.